Hey, what's up YouTube? My name is Mr. Kyle Cohen. I'm a 4th grade teacher in Cleveland, Ohio, and welcome to my YouTube channel. If this is your first time here, you picked a really great one. I have one of my absolute favorite YouTube internet pals, Braelyn Martin, joining me today for a really special conversation. If you are not familiar with Braelyn and her channel, I will link her down below. Braelyn is a special education teacher. She is a fellow teacher YouTuber and is just an absolute light and joy, and someone who I'm just really excited to be having here on this YouTube channel. Today we're talking about things that all teachers and all people really need to know about special education. This field and this work is not only essential and something that we all need to be thinking about as educators, but something that we both feel is really not talked about and something that we both believe needs more exposure. So I'm really excited to be bringing you this conversation today. Make sure you subscribe to my channel so you do not miss out on any future videos, and let's get into it. Hello. This is fun. It's so good to see
Yay!
you. Thank you for being here and chatting with me today. I'm really excited to talk about you and special education and all things teaching. So let's do it.
I'm excited.
Um, can you just start off by introducing yourself, a little bit about you, a little bit about why you decided to go into special education, and just all those sorts of things?
Oh, yeah. So my name is Braelyn Martin, and I'm a special ed teacher, like Kyle said. Um, Honestly, I've always wanted to be a teacher. Teaching was like my number one. It was the only career path I thought about. I've always wanted to be a teacher, and honestly, I only looked at teaching colleges, and my parents were really adamant that I become a pharmacist, or they're both financial advisors and work at banks and all this stuff. So they would bring me on college tours to other places, and I was like, no, I don't want to see this. I don't want to do any of this. I only want to teach. That's the only thing I want to do. And so I thought I would be a kindergarten teacher. Like I didn't really have special ed on my radar. I had done like um, Special Olympics and I had helped at all these things, but I wasn't super, I don't know, I wasn't sure of what I wanted. I just knew I wanted to be in a classroom all day and be in school the rest of my life. So it wasn't until college that at my school you had to do like a kind of like a internship your freshman year, and so I ended up doing it in a special ed classroom, and it was only like 5 hours a week, and I loved it. And I remembered like, oh my gosh, I love watching kids learn. I love having one kid at a time. I'm not the kind of person who would want a room with 35. I have so much respect for teachers who can do that because I really want one kid at a time. And I've always been like a creative person, so I wanted to do art. And I thought that special ed, I would be able to reach kids in a different way than just curriculum or just like the basic ways of reaching kids. I thought I would be able to be more creative. So that was kind of like the beginning stage. The other stage was that my school offered way more scholarships for special
There it
ed, and
is.
I was honestly like, oh my gosh, I don't want to pay for this. So there were like many layers. And I thought, I will do this because I really love it. I really want to get into it. But it just appealed to me. I like marginalized groups.
Mm,
It sounds bad, but like anything that's underserved, like I will get behind that 100%. And so I think it just, all the layers of it just kind of appealed to me. And then when you start working with kids with autism or with different disabilities, they just really tug at your heart. So
mm.
I think all of that kind of got me to really take it seriously. And then I studied it for both of my degrees. And um, yeah, I love it. It's the best job ever.
Awesome. So I think that for a lot of people who aren't in the field of education, or even people who are in school or becoming a teacher, we think a lot about special education teachers as teachers who work with kids with special needs. And I think that there is this huge misunderstanding of what your job actually is and what you all actually do. Can you kind of walk us through what a day-to-day could look like as a special education teacher and what some of those core differences are between a classroom teacher and a special education teacher?
Oh, yeah. I think the confusion is warranted. Like the confusion is okay because special ed has so many different types of settings and so
Mm-hmm.
many different types of classrooms that it's really confusing. Like within my school, there are like 8 different teachers that have special ed as their title, and we all kind of got similar degrees, but our jobs are very different. And so I want to make that clear because some special ed teachers, they work with one class all day. Some have an office where kids come to that office for certain services. Some of my close friends, at least in Boston where I live, most classrooms are co-taught. So
Mm-hmm.
they are teachers. They're in a classroom. They're them and their co-teacher have a combined classroom, and that's just the way it is. So I think there are so many different ways that special ed can look, and so the confusion makes so much sense to me. But I think for the most part, special ed teachers, they get the same training as general ed teachers, but the difference is that they focus specifically on learning gaps or finding ways to allow students to make up what they've missed or to fill in those gaps. And so their focus is not the majority of, keeping up with the pace. They're looking at the gaps and they're trying to find, okay, what way can I say this in a different way? Can I give a different activity? Can we look at it through a totally different sensory approach to get the same result? So they have to know the same standards, they have to know all the same stuff. I had to take the same test as everybody else. The only difference is like I'm looking at how can I get my student who doesn't speak to be able to take the same standardized test as every other third grader. So those are the kind of like, I don't know, problem solving things, I guess. But for a typical day, like I said, since it's so different, but I can just speak for me,
Yeah.
I always work in classrooms where they're with me all day. Sometimes they might go to inclusion for one subject or small things, but I'm their, I don't know, quote unquote, homeroom teacher. They're mine, they're on my roster. And we do the same things. I come into class, we usually have like a morning meeting, we have reading time, math time, everything. The only difference is that a lot of special ed classrooms are multi-grade. So I have to think about if I'm having science, I have to teach either 4 different lessons or 3 different lessons, or one whole group lesson that could be broken up into 3 grade levels. So that's interesting. But for the most part, we do a lot of small groups based on academic levels or grade levels. I think one thing about a day in the life of a special ed teacher is that you have other staff. You're rarely by yourself, um, which is really great, but also really challenging to be like when I started teaching, I was like 22 and I had like
Mm-hmm.
2 people who were working for me who were like in their 40s and 50s. And I was like, okay, I guess technically on paper I have more education than you, but like I'm 22, like I don't know anything. And so that's kind of tricky. But yeah, it kind of goes like that. There's just a lot of problem solving, a lot of similar things to what you would have, behaviors that you have to handle and stuff. But it just, I think it just takes a little bit of planning just to delegate to the other adults in the room.
Awesome. You spoke about all of the different possible settings for special education teachers. And one of those settings that you talked about is more of like a co-teaching model where you have a student who is in a general education classroom and they're getting pulled maybe throughout the day, or someone's pushing in throughout the day, not necessarily a student who is solely in a self-contained class. But for a general education teacher who has a classroom of 20, 25, 30 students, and maybe a few students are identified for a wide range of needs, what from your experience have you found are things that that teacher can be doing to set up a really positive relationship with their intervention specialist, that person who is servicing these students? Because at the end of the day, that relationship really does need to be there to make sure that that student is getting everything they need.
100%. I kind of see it as like co-parenting.
Mm.
So I think the rub is when one person wants to take sole ownership of the student or the work or the management of that whole case with the family and everybody. It can get really tricky because you just don't know where the boundaries are or what's this person's job versus this person's job. And so I think what I've seen as just the most successful, even if you're not in a co-teaching model like my model, I still have general ed teachers that I have to work closely with
Right.
because they get my kids for inclusion. It's really that co-parenting. It's like, I'm going to take so and so for whatever for 3 hours. Can you come back and get them at this time? It's really communication, communication, communication. And I think the things that I've seen that have been the most successful are just like this very respectful understanding of like we are both teachers, both professionals, and we have both different sets of skills. And I need you, you need me. So I can give an example of the best, which is what I currently have. There's one student I have, and their general ed teacher. There's been a lot of back and forth. My student could be in inclusion for a lot longer than she currently is. That teacher is amazing. She's like, okay, I don't really know how to handle autism, and I'm not quite sure, like, how many times do you think I should call on her, or like
Mm.
what would be comfortable for her, or like what are some things. So I started pre-teaching some stuff. So I would ask her, what skills does she need to know or be kind of comfortable with so that you could feel comfortable having her in class. And she gave me like a few skills that she would need. So then we practiced those skills, and then we went back and communicated. And I said, you know what, call on her like this, or these are the kind of questions that would be best for her. And I wrote down like a cheat sheet and all of that stuff. So I think just communication is so key. I think from a special ed perspective, it takes a lot more work, I think, on our end, because like I try to create sheets of their skills, their deficits, their disability, a little understanding of the disability so that the general ed teacher gets it, stuff like that. Just little anything that would take the load off. I think on the flip side for me, the the I teach kindergarten through third grade. All of those grade level teams I've started to create really good relationships with. They share their lesson plans with me, and so I can try and pre-teach as much as I can, even if it's not like a detailed lesson plan. But they're like, we're trying to read like this type of book, or we're working on fairy tales this month, or something. Anything that I can use to help. Um,
Yeah.
and so that's been really helpful. So I think just those kind of things are key. But I've worked with some really, really terrible teachers too. And they just say, this is not my job. This is not my kid. And I don't feel comfortable. And you can see the discomfort on their face. Parents can see it. Admin can see how uncomfortable they are. And it's like, I get it, but like we gotta we gotta find ways to keep this kid included, and the truth is it takes all of us to do it. So I hope that answered the question.
Oh, completely. And I
Okay.
think what really resonates is the fact that, like, on both ends of the spectrum, those really positive examples and the example that you gave, it's when that communication is there and it is this
Mhm.
back and forth in problem solving in seeing what's working, seeing what's not working constantly. And then on that other far end of the spectrum, it's the general education teacher saying that that's not my student. Like, they're not,
Mhm.
like, whatever goes on, like, their intervention specialist has got it. I'm going to ignore that kid, not my issue, things like that.
Yeah, and I get that. Like it's intimidating. And I think we kind of alluded to it
It could
earlier.
be
We
it
were
could be a
chatting.
power struggle.
Yes, it's intimidating. Sometimes it's intimidating for me as a special ed teacher because I don't teach all of the content. I sometimes think I probably could teach it, but I don't. I don't have 25, 30 kids. I, you guys are under different layers of stress than I am. Like, I get there's a difference. It can be intimidating both ways, and you just don't want to, offend anyone or anything. But I think as adults, it's like constant communication. And I think special ed teachers are really used to that because we work with speech and OT and physical therapy. Like we have to, it's legally bound in some of the IEPs that we have to communicate with them on a regular basis. So it's more normal for on our end. And it's like, okay, I don't want to like offend people, but like this kid has autism and you just reading verbatim from the book is like not gonna help. Like there's some things you just have to, but I've noticed some teachers, that's their identity. general ed teachers is they are
Mm.
a teacher. They have studied this. Sometimes if you get to higher grades too, they were a chemist and they're teaching chemistry, or they studied science and now they're teaching science or math or whatever. So it's not just that they're a teacher, it's that that content is deeply embedded into their education, into what they enjoy doing. And so anyone of any kind coming in and saying, hey, is it possible to make this a bit more visual, like
Mm.
is a little offensive sometimes. And so it's like finding the way to have a good relationship. It's kind of like working with kids. It's like you have to have the relationship first and then it'll like flow from there. So I kind of see it in that way. But I think the good thing is that special ed teachers can really honestly make you anything. If you want a visual, they can make you a visual. You just have to ask. It's usually our favorite hobbies. If you want like if you want understanding of a really weird niche disability, like we're all here. Like that's all we want to do is like give you this
Show
knowledge of what
up.
like yes, I'm like, if you come, like, I won't always come to you about it, but like, if you come to me and like, this kid can't see, great. Oh my gosh, yay, I have 5 different fonts that will work. Like, it's just, you just have to like be willing to start the convo.
Completely. And I think that leads into a really like the next big thing that I wanted to ask you, which is like if you are a general education teacher and you're working with a group of students, and at the beginning of the year, you obviously would be informed if you have a student in your classroom who has some sort of needs that need to be met legally, like you will be informed of that. But if you have a student in your class and they have not been formally identified for anything, but as their teacher, you're making some noticings, you're really present, you're forming that relationship, you're taking data, you're doing all these things, and something isn't working, what would you advise that that teacher does from there?
Oh my gosh, that is so common. And I think that is the hardest part. When you have a kid with a disability, everything's in writing.
Mhm.
Like it's legally there, but like those tricky cases where things are not quite 100% on paper or it's just a little confusing, I still think reaching out for support is the best option at first. I want to say that. I think there are a lot of teachers that feel like this is my classroom. I should know how to handle this behavior, or I should know how to provide this accommodation or find a way to reach this kid. It's like we don't all always know everything, you know? Some doctors don't know every disease.
Right?
They still have to do the research to figure it out. I don't know every disability. So it's like we still have to reach out for help. So I want to say that first because it's sad and tricky place to be when you're like, dang, I have 30 kids and one of them is really causing trouble and I don't know what to do. That's the worst feeling. I do think it's worth reaching out. So there are a few things that come to my mind. But again, I want to say special ed is very litigious. It's very legal focused. Every piece of paperwork has a part to it and there's a time frame and it's really a scary place to be to do it the wrong way. So I
Hmm.
would say before you even think, oh, they have a disability, they need this service, just add them to your caseload. You need to go through the right channels in no matter what state or province you're in. Um, but I would say the first thing would be talk to whoever's above you, an administrator, somebody else, because they would know a little bit more about the legal process. Um, there's a lot of things you can do. You can, through conferences or different things, you can talk to the parents about some of your concerns. That's just within a normal teacher's right. You can start taking some data, like informal data of like, ooh, they're throwing a chair this day, this day, this day, or they're in second grade and they're still at a pre-K reading level and somehow they've made it this far. I'm going to keep track of what they know and what they don't know so that I have some proof. You need some proof. It can't just be from your head. Then they would probably, after that, bringing it to your administration would probably lead you down the right channels, which is to call together a team meeting. Then, depending on the state, like I know you're in Ohio, so you have 45 in Ohio. I'm pretty sure it's 45 school days before you have to call in. Like
Yeah.
it just goes like boom, boom, boom. So you have to really make sure you talk to a higher person first before you call a parent and say we need to have a meeting. But I think in the meantime, you can still reach out to a special ed teacher, an intervention specialist, a behavior specialist, and be like, I'm not coming as an official thing. I just want to know what other things can I do in my classroom. You can't do it for one kid, that's illegal, but you can do it at a classroom wide level to try and support the lowest of the group. So if that means, setting timers, if that means having not just a regular schedule, but a visual schedule, if it means you have to repeat the directions 5 times and put them visually, that's for everybody, but that will definitely bring up the rear. Just having structured breaks and just running it a little bit, maybe almost a little bit more like my type of classroom, like a
Right.
self-contained, but you can still reach all your academics and you're doing it for everyone, not just one kid, and that's not illegal, if that makes sense. I'm trying to be
Completely.
careful with the wording because it's tricky. I've had people be like, can you add him? Can you see him for reading? And it's like, I physically can't. It's illegal in all
No,
50 states.
completely. It's all those legality pieces too. And then I think more of like a newer teacher perspective, it's like, it's really scary to reach out for help. And you really feel, I can understand someone feeling inferior if they are not able to crack this kid or solve this problem or get the results that they're looking for. And it could be this internal struggle when at the end of the day, this kid might just need some help.
That's a really good point. I kind of came to that conclusion the first 2 years of teaching, where I had felt like, and tell me if you relate, like when you want to be a teacher, you want to be a good teacher. And some people have, like me, have dreamt about it their whole life. Others just happen to fall into this profession, but you want to do what's right. And I think every teacher has this deep intrinsic motivation of serving others, serving kids, changing lives, right? Like it's such a big part of what we do. And I think it gets wrapped up into many layers. Like for me, it got wrapped up into just my creativity, my creative outlet, my self-esteem, my career, the way how I was feeding myself, like my friend group. It was wrapped up into so much. So the moment that something is not right, it takes you out of your homeostasis, right? Like you're um, either triggered, it hurts your feelings. This is such a heart-filled
Yeah, it's like
profession that
personal.
it's personal. It's so personal. That's the right way to describe it. And I think that's why I feel for people. And that's why special ed, it's like, please always reach out and always ask for help because it doesn't reflect badly on you. Because if you're doing it like, I want to help a kid get better, if you're like, I've not taught them anything and it's been 6 months, then I don't know, maybe it does reflect on you. But if it's like, I just want something to help or to make this a little better, that just looks like you're being proactive and doing your job.
Right.
But I think you're right. The first year is really, really hard. I would say the first three. The first
Hmm.
3 years are just like, are you sure I'm supposed to be here? I'm like, I feel like a child. Like, I
We
don't
need an
know
adult.
anything.
Someone get the adult.
Yeah, literally. Also, like, literally, because I used to do my first year of teaching, I did third through, I ended up doing like first through fifth or whatever, but I had a good amount of fifth graders who were 11, 12, some of them had stayed
Hmm.
back. And then I had these other teachers in my building who were like in their 50s, and then the paraprofessionals who were in their 50s. I was like, I'm closer in age to these children than I am to you. Like, yes, call an
Yeah.
adult because we're all in the same boat over here in this room. So
Right.
it's tricky, definitely, but I think that's where it's like reminding, like, I am a good teacher. I know how to do this. Like I was trained to do this. I have the background, the education for the most part to back me up on this, or I'm getting the right training as I'm teaching. Um, I can do it. Like I don't want to second guess myself. It's tricky to get to that point and not doubt yourself.
100%. Final takeaways that you would almost want to leave everyone with of like, if you are a general education teacher working in a classroom, here are some things that you should just really be aware of when it comes to the world of special education.
Oh yeah. First off, I want to say I know general ed teachers have a lot on their plate. So all the things I'm going to say, I know it's like, oh my gosh, am I going to add more to my plate? Do I have to do more?
Mm,
But I think thinking about it as like you really want to reach every kid, and the stuff you're going to learn about this one kid with more delays or disabilities actually probably could help all kids. So it's not a waste of time. I think the first thing is I would really want a general ed teacher to know that like every disability is different and it does take
Yeah.
some time to learn it. So you've had a kid with autism every year in your class for the last 15 years. They're all different. So you have to take a tiny bit of time. You might not need to do the research about autism, although I think some teachers do need to do that, but just a little bit of time and like what is their background or whatever, even if it's something simple like dyslexia, like I would just want to do a little research on the types of fonts that work best, just general stuff. Just a little bit of research into this child and what they might need. I think the other thing is, again, make that relationship known and start to build that really good relationship with the special ed teacher or whoever else is with you on this case, and really trust their judgment and they'll trust your judgment as well. I think the other big thing is something that I think trips people up in general ed. I want to make sure I say this right, is what do I do?
Mm.
Like, okay, they're here, they don't know how to read. The rest of my class knows how to read. What does that mean? And I think there's a lot. That's why people go to school for a long time for this. I'm not going to do a whole college level class, but I think the most bare bones important thing is to understand the difference between an accommodation and a modification. If you can do those two things, you don't need the high level of classes and understanding and knowledge. So an accommodation is this child can do what the other fifth graders are doing. They just need a little support. So thinking about that, you have a book, a Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, whatever you're reading, can I get it in an audiobook? Can I also get it with pictures? That's an accommodation because they're still understanding the content. So understanding like this kid, what accommodations can I do? Little tweaky things, a little time on a test, larger font, pencil, highlighter, pre-written notes, stuff like that. The other option is modification. So knowing the difference, all these kids, I just need a little tweak accommodation. We're good. We're Gucci. The other option is I need a modification, which is actually changing the content. It's modifying it. So if you can look at the students you have, the few that might have a few delays, and see, okay, these few need a couple accommodations. That's easy. That can be done in my planning. These three or this one needs a modification or two or three. Now I have that in my head. I will make time to go and talk to the special ed teacher about those modifications and be a bit proactive. So I hope that makes sense because people can get lost and they can go, I need this, I need this. Oh my gosh, I can't do it. I'm just going to like pretend this doesn't exist. But breaking it down to the bare bones of an accommodation or a modification is key. And there are tons of articles and things, or just even people within your school that would know the difference that could just guide you. You can make a simple little list, T-chart with it.
Awesome. Can I ask you my rapid fire questions?
Oh, I'm ready. Wait, can I have some of my Diet Coke?
Please. Do you watch or do you listen to any of Brene Brown's podcasts? Are you familiar with her?
I've read some of her books, but I haven't listened to her podcast. No.
She
Ooh.
has recently tapped into the world of podcasts, like in the past, I think since COVID, honestly. Um,
Yes.
and she, in all of her podcasts, ends with these rapid fire questions. So these are inspired by Brene Brown.
I
Okay.
love it. Okay, I'm ready.
Last show that you binged and loved.
Wow. Queen's Gambit.
Mm.
Definitely. The Queen's Gambit, but tonight I'm starting The Undoing. So I haven't started it yet. I haven't had time because I have been trying to finish like 3 videos, but tonight I'm starting it. So don't say anything, but I'll text you tomorrow when I finish it.
Finished it the final one aired last night and finished it
Yeah.
last night. It has been all I've been doing
But
since
I think that's
Thanksgiving.
helpful because I can just binge the whole darn thing. I don't have
It's
to
just
wait.
a really long movie. Like it's barely a TV show.
Love it.
Amazing. What is on your nightstand?
Oh my gosh. Okay, I usually have 2 books, a lamp, a cup of water with ice. I love water. I drink so much water. It's like a problem. Um, and my nightstand is a bookshelf. Both of my nightstands are actually bookshelves, so there's just more books in the shelves. That's it, honestly.
Amazing. What is something that people often get wrong about you?
Oh, that I'm extroverted.
Mm.
I'm not. I'm very introverted. I'm not shy. I'm not like gonna go to an event and not talk, but I'm introverted in that I would much rather be by myself all the time or not talk. So I think that's people might see me on social media, on YouTube or whatever, and be like, oh, she's bubbly and friendly. Yes, I'm still the same type of person, but if I had my way, I would spend my days in silence.
You're in the right field.
Yes, I know.
No, just kidding.
Oh.
What is a snapshot of an ordinary moment in your life that brings you joy?
Oh, that's great. That's such a good question. I know it's supposed to be rapid fire, but I'm really stuck. Um, I really like to create things, anything. So I will a snapshot would be me sitting here or sitting at my on my couch or somewhere doing something. Either I'm knitting, sewing, filming, editing, reading, drawing, writing, something to create something I always have to do that. And I think that is what brings me the most joy. And so you'll always find me doing it at some point in the day because I've not ever gone a day without doing something like that.
Final question. What is your hope for the world of education?
Wow. Honestly, so generic. I just dream that one day it'll be more inclusive. I just think we've come very far with everything, but there's a long way to go. My dream is that um, all general ed teachers will understand disability because it will be more normative to have to teach all types of kids. That we won't have to fight to include real history, Native history, any type of history. The fact that that's like optional is ridiculous to me. So anything that's more inclusive, that represents everyone, that's my dream, to have a really amazing education system that's well supported, well funded, and um, teaches authentic stuff.
Braelyn, this has been a joy, a pleasure. Thank,
Yay!
thank you so much.
Of course, this is so fun. I loved it.
Thank you so much for joining me and Braelyn in this conversation today. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure you give this video a like, hit that red subscription button down below so you do not miss out on any future videos. I so appreciate you being here. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.
That's good.